Oh, hello everyone. So good to see you. So good to see a lot of familiar faces here today for our first webinar in the year, 2026. Somebody told me it should be the year of the horse, which apparently should be a very lucky year. Good to see you, Alana. Good to see you, Chris. I don't know how you've been feeling, but it's been a bit of a whirlwind year to begin with, I would say. And well, I'm very excited about this webinar here today, is basically because of that backdrop that we are in quite challenging times. And for those of you who come from the side of sustainability, I think all of us know that working in sustainability is a little bit of an extreme sport. You've got to be used to taking some punches. But we'll get into a lot of talk about arguments, effectiveness, etc., and dog into this amazing study that I've done with WARC. So a great thank you to the WARC research team and all the work that they've been doing. A little bit of housekeeping, not a lot. Basically, as usual, if you want to keep your videos on, I can see Chris, Alana, great to see you guys. Keep the mic off. We will have time for questions, so do ask them as they pop into your mind in the chat if you want to, and I'll get back to them. And I'll probably do like a little bit of a half time, so 30 minutes in, we'll open up the mic if somebody wants to talk. Fine, if not, ask them in the chat and I'll try to respond to that. And then we'll do the very same little exercise in the end. So for me, a lot of this is also about building the business case for sustainability and why you should spend your marketing box or innovation box or whatever you want to spend on sustainability. And I think over the years, I've always used a couple of arguments. One has sort of been legislation. I think we all got to realize that we can't really trust our regulators. It does seem like regulation is changing. So it's a hard argument to put into the boardroom. Consumers, yeah, they're fickle. What do they care about? What do they don't care about? Do they really follow through with their wallet? It's a big question. So what I really liked about this piece of research was that we looked at a very simple thing, effectiveness. So how does sustainability show up in that context? So I'll dive a little bit into that today, and do feel free to, as I said, ask questions, etc. It's just going to make it a much more fun. Um, so there's a little deck. We're going to see quite a bit of data, etc. But we will also see some pieces of work, which I think is also important. Feel free to share. This is probably the one time where it's clever to share. Either at the very finish of this, do feel free to, we will be sending out the video afterwards, so feel free to share that internally. Screen dump the slides, whatever you want to. It's free, it's shareable. For those of you who don't know me too well, my name is Thomas. I obviously have one hat on, which is doing stuff like this, sharing insights, sharing knowledge, writing books, etc. Secondly, I also do head up the Goodvertising Agency. We're sort of a boutique impact consultancy that works across brand strategy, campaigns, impact, marketing excellence. So if you're into any of that stuff, always feel free to reach out. My journey into the effectiveness space started many gray hairs ago when I wrote my first book, Goodvertising. And it might seem a little bit naive at that time, but the premise I put forward in the book was what's good for people and planet is good for brand and bottom line. Remember, I was in my very early 30s when I wrote that book, and it was different. It was around 2010, 2011. We didn't have a lot of research going into this, and there wasn't actually a lot of research being done, especially not into the effectiveness or any of this stuff. Yet what was so interesting about the book was that we dwelled into some of this stuff. We looked at things that I kind of had an idea that this might be something that works. So getting closer to people, being more personal, being more emotional. Yeah, that might work. And through this decade or so, and that's the interesting thing, that the research we've done started in 2013. My book came out in 2012. I had a notch about it, but I didn't really have any proof. A lot of this stuff was also in my first book, interviewing thought leaders in this space, David Droga, whom you might know from Droga 5, who's now part of Accenture, and many others. And And through that journey, I started obviously also asking some more critical questions with my second book, which was basically, creating these sort of hero type brands. Does that really work? Do people really trust them? All these big questions. And then we actually started doing quite a bit of research in connection with that book. One of the key takeaways we did during the research leading up and after the Hero Tribe book, amongst others, together with GFK, so thank you to GFK for that, was a very clear correlation between brands that ask and nurtures and support us rather than lecture us seem to be much more effective at driving behavior change and creating interest and making people feel better about buying that brand. So this whole project started about 2 years in Cannes. It was a little bit of a full circle for me in some ways because David Droga was one of the guys I interviewed for my first book, and obviously judging the Sustainable Development Goals lines in Cannes with David Droga being my jury president was kind of like a full circle. And in Cannes, I met up with the WARC team, and they said, but obviously we have all this research around effectiveness. They've been doing that. It's called the WARC Effectiveness 100. So basically, that was the top we looked at. So basically, the most 100 effective pieces of work globally, and they've been doing that since 2013. So meeting up with the WARC team, I started asking questions like, wait a moment, if you guys have all this research, have you ever looked at how environmental campaigns, social campaigns show up? And they never actually asked themselves that question. So we went on this quite big endeavor in going through all the cases, watching all the cases, and then determining, is this a main story in the commercial and the campaign, or is this a side story? So that's sort of where it started, and it was the first time, to my knowledge at least, anybody had looked at a whole decade of effective creative work. And today, what we're going to do is, which I'm very excited about, we're not only going to look at this decade, but we're going to look at the first single year that we have done. So last year, so this is the first time we had the possibility to deep dive into 1 year, and there's some really exciting things we found out during that journey. For those of you who are not super advertising, Cannes Lions awards, and let's acknowledge that. Awards do have a place. They do show where you can push marketing. They do show what the craft can enable. The little limitation in terms of research in this context is, though, to be part of the WARC Effectiveness 100, you obviously need to enter the award. And this is awards very broadly, so anything that goes into this piece of work could have been entered into the Effies, which is an effectiveness prize. It could be entered into global award shows such as the One Show, Cannes Lions, Eurobest, etc. So those are sort of the data points that we're looking at again, and these are all sort of global pieces of work. So it's a little bit of the context. Another thing that might be good to think about is that when we write 2014, this is basically the year that it's being awarded. But to be awarded, it has been made in 2013. So that's also why I said 2013. It can seem a little bit confusing, but it's the work that is entered the year before. So also now when we talk about 2025 numbers, these are in fact 2024 campaigns that you will be watching. So it's only next year we will be able to actually look at the actual 2025 work. So anyways, let's begin with a bit of work because one of the interesting things is obviously that some of this work has become sort of campaigns, purpose campaigns that I think all of us in this space know and love. And what's interesting is a lot of these campaigns show up, some of the same brands show up across all of these years. So I just want to kick off to warm this little up. Kind of feel like a substitute teacher showing films right now, but let's begin with just one commercial that some of you might have seen. It has won a lot of award shows and has a very long tail of award shows. Let's just watch this first one.
Nana, shield, leg. हेलमेट
होमवर्क हो गया?
मम्मी ये देखो
फिर दाग लगा दिया। पापा ये लीजिए आपके घर जाने की टिकट। हेलो, या आई एम जस्ट गोइंग टू सेंड यू द ईमेल इन 5 minutes. या गिव मी 5 minutes. I'm working on the present.
मेरी छोटी सी गुड़िया कितनी बड़ी हो गई, घर घर खेलती थी, अब घर संभालती है, ऑफिस संभालती है। आई एम सो प्राउड एंड आई एम सो सॉरी। सॉरी कि ये सब तुम्हें अकेले करना पड़ता है। सॉरी कि जब तुम घर घर खेलती थी तो मैंने तुम्हें रोका नहीं। ये नहीं कहा कि ये सिर्फ तुम्हारा काम नहीं है, तुम्हारे हस्बैंड का भी है, पर कहता भी कैसे है।
और मेरी ग्रीन शर्ट धो देना।
मैंने भी तो कभी तुम्हारी मम्मी की हेल्प नहीं की, और तुमने जो देखा वही सीखा। तुम्हारे हस्बैंड ने भी बचपन में यही देखा होगा, घर घर खेलते वक्त वो टीवी देखने की या न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ने की एक्टिंग करता होगा, और तुम जैसी कोई छोटी सी लड़की चाय बनाने की एक्टिंग करती होगी। उसके डैड की तरफ से सॉरी, तुम्हारे डैड की तरफ से सॉरी, और हर उस डैड की तरफ से सॉरी जिसने कई कई सालों से एक गलत एग्जाम्पल सेट किया। पर अभी भी देर नहीं हुई। इस सॉरी के साथ मैं अपनी तरफ से एक छोटी सी कोशिश करूंगा कि घर के काम में मम्मी की हेल्प करूं। किचन का किंग ना बन पाऊं तो कम से कम लॉन्ड्री में तो हाथ बटाऊं। इतने साल एक गलत एग्जाम्पल सेट किया है, अब कुछ सही कर जाऊं। तुम्हारा पापा।
So an incredibly effective piece of work, Share the Load, that has run in many other countries in Europe, etc. This is the one in India, which I think is even more sort of boundary breaking in terms of its reach. But let's dive into the numbers here, 2013 to 2023, before we go into the new numbers, the deep dive into 2024. What you'll see, as I said, we are basically looking at the top of the top, the very, very best of effectiveness globally. So out of 100 campaigns globally, what you will see here is in 2013, if we begin there, the 33 campaigns had either a social theme, which is marked by the blue color, an environmental theme with the green color, or covering both themes with the sort of pinkish or whatever color you want to call that. For me, it's when you look across the years, I probably would have been expecting more of a curve, an upward surge in the number of pieces of work, but we didn't really see that. What we did instead see was, in fact, quite a constant level, hovering around sort of 30 cases or so. What I find so interesting about this is that, and it's a really good argument to sort of push forward when we sometimes get a pushback on sustainability, is that one out of three, more or less, of campaigns globally has that are effective has a social or environmental theme to it. So this is sort of really building a strong business case for why it's valuable to integrate social environmental themes into the pieces of work that we all are doing. And obviously we'll come back to how and all of that, and what we can learn from some of these cases when we do the deep dive. Another quite clear takeaway that you might see, and again, remember, if you have any questions, do pop them in the chat as you think of them, and I'll answer some of them in about 10 minutes time, and then we'll dive into the 2024 numbers and even more times for Q&A. One of the clear things that I wasn't that shocked about was that the environmental themes didn't come out very strong in any of the years. It's something I unfortunately have observed in awards and basically across the scope. Even when we did research with GfK, it seems to be that the social campaigns are the ones that dominate, and probably most typically because it's a lot easier to put a face on that, to make something that's more easy to connect with, as we saw with Share the Load. So it does seem like there's a opportunity, an open door to be explored, to do more in the environmental space. And so obviously it's going to be interesting to see how that reflects last year. But that was one of the key takeaways. When we sort of look at product categories, which I also found quite interesting, again, remember this is only entered pieces of work, so they might not reflect what you might see in your commercial breaks. Retail, very dominating, and basically quite a lot of FMCG stuff, very, very dominating. But it is definitely retail that is the big one. Food, obviously, also quite strong. Toiletries, cosmetics. Um, and at the very top there, you see, or the very bottom, you see clothing and accessories. Why aren't we seeing more from one of the most polluting industries in the world? That's a big question. Again, maybe that is something that can be seen as an opportunity if there are somebody who works with fashion brands or represent fashion brands here today. I do think there's an opportunity there to be looked further into. Um, when we look at the regions, sort of Australia or the US, North America seems to be very much dominating here. When we look at the decade, Asia just trailing behind with Europe, so it's not a really big difference there. But there is quite a good sort of regional spread. Um, Middle East, North Africa, sort of catching up a little bit later, to be honest. So not very dominating in the beginning of the decade, but sort of catching up later in the decade. When we look at the brands, and I think this is really interesting. Again, this is the global numbers. I mean, obviously, you will, I think, know most of these brands. Lifebuoy, famous Unilever brand. Dove, same thing. Body Formula Breath, very famous as well. Been there for a long time. McDonald's, Vodafone. Baby Shop, maybe not that familiar for most people on this call. Baby Shop is a sort of UAE based baby retail store, quickly expanding India, other markets. Ariel, Cadbury, DP Export beer brand. Finnish, Pantene, Procter& Gamble, SK12, they were in the two, they were in the beauty category, Stray Free, Hygiene Pads, Volvo. So you will be knowing quite a few of these brands, but obviously what we do see is that a lot of these brands continue through the decade and showing up through the decade. So that's also a very important point here. So this was the first sort of revelation and first deep dive into the decade. Then I'll just quickly have a look at the chat and see how that's going. Then we'll dive into the 2024 numbers, and then which I think is probably the most important thing is, one thing is looking at the data, but what can we use it for? How can you apply some of these learnings in your creative work, bringing that into your back into the room with your clients, or maybe if you're brand side, maybe think about some of these levers when you develop the work, when you brief your agency. So let me just have a little quick look here on the chat to see what's happening. First one here, I can see there's a bit of hellos here, so that's good. So we have a question here from Annette, so thank you so much. Do we have, as a benchmark, the percentage of all campaigns with environmental and social theme? I am wondering if the result is because there are 5 to 6 times more ads on social theme, or if social theme is by nature more efficient than environmental. And yes, thank you for asking that question. And we again, as we look at the again at the overall award shows, yes, we do see more social works being entered. I think that has been at least what I've observed over the years, and when we look at the data, so there are simply just more social campaigns, and I think this sort of opens up the opportunity for more brands to engage in environmental stuff. I think what we can learn from this, what I'll come back to a little bit later, is that obviously we need to learn from what's effective in some of the social stuff and apply that in some of the environmental stuff. So how do we put a face on some of these environmental campaigns in a better way? So yeah, there's some of that to it, that maybe the data is a little bit different there. Carla asked, commercial big brands usually use social impact topics for their own awareness and less to solve the problem or to help nonprofits. My experience. What's your take? I mean, let me answer this question from a sort of data point of view. I think when we look at some of these campaigns, we do typically see this in collaboration with nonprofits quite often, or if not in collaboration with a nonprofit, a foundation. So Dove is an excellent example of that. You would have Dove and then connected to the Dove Foundation. We have seen similarly with Axe Links, where they have worked together with nonprofits that work on preventing male suicide. So there's a big collaboration typically happening from probably from a sort of authenticity, from a credibility point of view. We do see these collaborations quite strongly show up, and actually also when we see the creative work, that's something that comes true. That is something that's being emphasized often at the very end of the commercials. The idea about solving problems, it's a very, very good question. And I will come back to that. Actually, quite a few, and this is one of the themes that we took out when we watched a lot of this work, is in fact that a lot of brands are looking more at how can we apply our creativity to solve things. So one example of that is DP Export from Australia, a beer brand, and one of the campaigns they did was taking um, some of the brewing waste, barley, whatever, and then turn that into a biodiesel that they started selling. So actually coming up and productifying some of the things and showcasing that in the creative work. So it is one of the themes that we have seen across the decade, that solving things has become more prominent. And even if I look back at last year in Cannes, there was a lot of similar examples there. Um, Alana, maybe the big brands have a hard time with the environment. Yeah, yes. It's it's hard to say. I think obviously right now with the current political climate, there are definitely more difficulties around how you navigate that. Um, and this is not a data thing, but I would say that in my experience, I do think that the brands just aren't very good at diving into these things. And I think it's a shame. I think we should try and force ourselves, force the teams, force the clients to do more work around environmental themes. This research still showcase that it is effective. We still do have, uh, high-ish numbers. Still, we look at top 100 campaigns globally across the years. We still do see five, six, eight campaigns showing up looking at environmental things. When we've earlier have looked at, for example, the Super Bowl, we do see environmental work show up there. Unfortunately, the pattern there is very much the same in the Super Bowl. When we track that the last 8 years or so, again, social dominating there. So it just seems to be that it's easier to dive into some of these campaigns, unfortunately. But I think we can see it as an opportunity. Um, so let's dive a little bit into the data again here, and now look at the data for 2024. I don't know how you felt about it, but I very much felt that this was probably where the sort of mainstreaming of greenwashing began. I mean, greenwashing has probably been a predominant thing for at least us that works in sustainability for quite a number of years. But I think 2024 was definitely the year where this was something that entered more the sort of mainstream vocabulary and was being picked up by CMOs and others starting to talk about greenwashing. So I was very excited when we obviously did this 1 year deep dive, because I was like, is this going to show in the numbers? Are we seeing brands completely shying away from environmental issues? And will we as well see social issues maybe taking a dive as well? But actually, very much the opposite. So this is the highest year on record. 41 campaigns showed up again out of 100. Um, Astonishing, I would say. Again, not a lot on the environmental side, unfortunately, but this was a very, very strong year. Does this sort of show a more mainstream adaptation of some of this stuff across sort of the marketing landscape? Probably. I think, at least what I have experienced, and this cannot sort of be, I can't say that we can see this in the data. So this is my personal experience, but I do think we have seen a much more evolved conversation, more marketing people being involved in some of this, and I think this kind of starts showing up in some of the campaigns that we are seeing. Again, there was a lot of brands that we have seen before historically. Dove showed up last year. I mean, I'm always impressed by how a campaign that kicked off in 2007 still delivers super effective results, still find new and novel ways to create different types of conversations. And I know there was a question around solutions here as well. I mean, I think Dove showcase in many ways that they also try and solve some of this stuff. So this is not just a campaign, but also trying to build a different way of showcasing more diverse hairstyles, more diverse representation, building digital libraries to facilitate that and tools to facilitate that. Dove, a couple of years earlier, also did a campaign where they actually opened up a free model archive so people could go in, they could use diverse models, so also bringing solutions and showcasing the way forward. And I think also sometimes when we always bring in Dove, I think we sometimes forget how Dove looked like before 2007. And interestingly enough, they've been very good at cleaning up their path digitally. So it's actually very difficult to find early Dove work. So I had to go back quite a bit away. But basically back then the premise was much more about, better for your skin, the softness, which was what they ran actually basically up to 2007 before they changed. So it's just fundamentally interesting to see how a brand that was extremely traditional in its way of playing on traditional marketing attributes suddenly found a resounding purpose that connected with people. So very, very interesting. They've been there through the years. There were also last year a couple of new interesting voices and cases out there. This is another example of trying to come up with a solution. Honest X did a step tracker on their chickens to show how healthy they were. So like you might have maybe when you go for a run or whatever, then Honest X didn't want just to claim that their chickens had a very healthy life. No, you can actually go in and you can check how many steps they get in there. So I think that's kind of taking that further and also showcasing what technology can do. I showed this case to a farmer friend of mine who is one of the biggest chicken producers in Europe, and he laughed a little bit because, in fact, he shared with me that a lot of the chicken farms today do actually have video cameras observing the chickens, seeing how they move around. With AI, they analyze them, and now they can also sometimes even prevent or at least project if these chickens are beginning to look sick because they start moving differently. So maybe, again, this is more of a marketing stunt, and maybe the industry in itself are actually further ahead than this. When we look at the top brands from last year, we do see Dove completely dominating the year. We've seen that across the decade as well. And I want to sort of emphasize what this also means. This also means that you have a brand that believes in creative excellence, that believe in the power of creativity in terms of delivering effectiveness, but also a brand that doesn't shy away from using social issues to fuel that marketing growth. Other campaigns, McDonald's, seen them a lot of times before. Durex, not that Reckitt and some of the other products haven't showed up. They are a brand that does show up in some of this stuff, so not completely unusual either. And then, and I'm sorry to butcher this word, Alana, because I know you're from Brazil. I should be doing that better. I'm going to try and say it, o botisario. And for those who are not too familiar with that brand, it is a sort of beauty brand, typically in competition with Natura, which might be more familiar to some of the people on this call. Very good to see those guys entering into the competition and doing really solid, effective work here. So 2024 in so many ways showed up stronger, more effective, and for me, good news for the marketing community. I got to be honest, I'm very excited about next year's result. Obviously, with everything that's happening on a sort of geopolitical level, we're going to see some of these brands change course, especially some of the brands that have invested in this over time. And this is one thing that's also very, very important, that a key takeaway in this is obviously that consistency really matters. Keep investing in it and it pays off. Let's dive a little bit into the drivers, and I think this is something that is very, very important takeaways, and how you can apply some of this stuff is when you do your ideation, when you unleash your creative teams, I use them as prompts, prompt cards, to say, how can you insert some of this effectiveness knowledge that we have and turn into a driver of creative excellence? So these 5 were 5 things that stood out when we looked at about, all in all, 1,000 cases globally. I promise you, it was a lot of watching videos and commercials. It's almost like going back at award judging. Reward the right behavior came out. I'm going to deep dive into them, show examples. Empowering people, something that I was very happy showed up there because it was obviously the theme of my last book, The Hero Trap. Rethink problems, get personal. Why I put that one in there, and why I did the little Goodvertising intake with that was that was actually one of the things that I put in the book back in 2012. So quite fun to kind of have the data backing up on that now and create a new category. So reward the right behavior, and I'm very happy about this one because it is something that we see a lot of the associations and organizations working on this, whether it's Ad Zero and others, emphasizing this ability of marketing to obviously change behaviors for the better, and so it's very good to kind of see that play out and being a very strong lever of change. So one of the examples that has been awarded was, for example, Tesco Malaysia, that basically gave customers a little reward when they came back with their plastic bags, in a way of sort of positive reinforcement. So thinking about how across the scope you can reward the right behaviors is something that we saw as a strong part across some of the creative work. So a good one to think about.
Due to the lack of awareness of the global issues, Malaysians are much less aware of the impact of plastics.
Single-use carry bags are killing our ocean. We need to do something to stop that. Until we can fundamentally change people's behaviour, we won't be able to make a difference.
mengambil langkah proaktif dengan melancarkan The
Tesco
Bag.
Malaysia launched the unforgettable bag.
Even if they bring them back once, it starts to resolve the problem. But we've seen hundreds of thousands of bags coming back already, and we see that moving into the millions before the end of the year.
The unforgettable bag gives people a reason to bring back bags, even if they don't know about the environment.
It's great, dives into a little bit of the solution. This is an older piece of work from, I think, 2015, 2016. So rewarding the right behavior. Again, I'd encourage you to download the research in general, where you'll see a lot of other examples of how this can be applied, but one quite clear example of how rewarding the right behavior. Another thing that came out was in thinking about how you can actually empower people in being part of the change. I think this is a theme that I'm a big believer in, especially as we're seeing advertising marketing changing. We do see now that people are the biggest producers of content. So if we as advertisers, marketeers don't acknowledge that, and rather than just targeting people, start enabling them to share, be part of the conversations about issues they care about, I don't think we will be successful. And as I said, with GfK and others, we have done a lot of research in this. So I was very happy that this was a very clear-cut case across the decade that we saw this. So let's just have a look at a very famous example of this from American Express. And this campaign also has been exported to the UK and other markets with similar results. Whoops, there I was a little bit too fast.
In 2010, American Express created Small Business Saturday, a new shopping day right after Black Friday, America's biggest, most iconic shopping day of the year, 1 month before Christmas. Small Business Saturday was designed to help small businesses get what they needed most in the struggling U.S. economy, customers. But for 2011, the goal was clear: to cement its place as an official shopping day during the holiday season. American Express couldn't do that single-handedly, so they rallied business owners, consumers, and public officials to help. First, they gave small business owners a toolkit to carry the day. American Express armed them with everything they'd need, from a Shop Small badge, to posters, to social marketing tools. This digital kit featured a YouTube video maker for businesses to make their own ads, a Facebook page builder, and a way to launch online Shop Small deals through Foursquare. Over 500,000 owners took advantage. Next, American Express reached out to get public officials on board. Communities and states from coast to coast declared their support. Even the United States Senate stepped up and passed a resolution declaring Small Business Saturday an official day unanimously. Finally, American Express rallied millions of shoppers to join the movement by finding local businesses and pledging to make one small purchase.
I pledge to shop small at Big Top Candy Shop.
Allen's Boots.
At Juno Baby Store.
Make the pledge to shop small.
Please.
Shop small on Small Business Saturday.
So how big was it?
20% increase. Our sales were up about 30%.
166% increase from last year.
In the end, it became a top 10 trending topic on Twitter. The second annual Small Business Saturday reached 2.7 million likes on Facebook, more than double the first year. Most importantly, 103 million Americans shopped small, from California to Washington, D.C.
This is Small Business Saturday, so we're out here supporting small businesses.
In just over a year, Small Business Saturday went from a day that didn't exist to a permanent fixture on the holiday shopping calendar. See you next year.
As you will see, some of these campaigns obviously have multiple of these mentions built into them. There's a bit of a behavior change thing built into this as well. What's so interesting to see is also how these campaigns built. So this is the sort of accumulated amount being spent in US small businesses year over year. So we see this growth, and we've seen similar numbers for the UK. So quite an interesting case about empowering people. Rethink problems. For those of you who don't know this campaign, it's really just about reframing, rethinking. We see this a lot across the awarded work, the most effective work, and I think this is really an excellent example of that in a time where, you know, talk about circularity or food waste, etc. These are campaigns that we see. These are campaigns we tire of. And here we have somebody who came up with a completely original way of seeing the problem. The ugly carrot in a soup, who cares? It's probably the first time I ever felt something for a carrot. and being able to build so much emotion into a campaign, and even expanding that into new product categories, such as launching a juice or a carrot soup, is just ingenious. This is a campaign that has been widely copied ever since it was originally done by Intermarché in France. So rethinking the problem is really sort of a powerful demonstration of creative excellence. The next one, I'm not going to play this one just to have more time for conversation, discussion. Get personal. You have to take some of these complicated sustainability issues and make them personal. The example here was just an example from Bodyform Le Presse, an amazing piece of work, but I think you get the point here. Always think about how you can put a human face on the challenge. I think this is one of the most powerful drivers of effectiveness, and something, as I mentioned earlier on, I picked up in my first book as well. Create a new category, pull it completely out of the context that it's usually in, and see what you can do with it. This is an example from back market, and basically making recycled, upselling, all this stuff a new status quo, making that the new cool. Is something that obviously today is a bit more mainstream. IKEA and many other retailers have gone into this space. Back market is an excellent example of that. So again, when you look at your creative campaigns, your creative work, do ask yourself these 5 questions. It's a good nudge. It's a good little creative hack to bring with you into the creative development. There were some key themes that showed up in the decade, and I'm going to dive into what last year showed us. But across the 10 years, these 6 themes were the biggest. Female empowerment, and probably not a big surprise, public health, tackling poverty, reducing waste, supporting local businesses, and circular business models were the sort of 6 key themes that we saw across the decade. When you take a deeper look into the data, what you sometimes can use these things for is obviously understanding what issues are being over-communicated, where are there gaps. Again, if you look at, for example, the Sustainable Development Goal, Lions, a Cannes Lions award category, it's also a very good place to look at how this changes over years. And every year, some of the SDGs are more dominating than others, and this is a very good thing to look at as well. If you are, let's say, in a very crowded category, beauty and cosmetics, or if you are in food, think about what themes aren't very over-communicated, and if they are very over-communicated, again, try and reframe is one way of retaining or regaining effectiveness. When we look at last year, and this is only a single year, it is a little bit not the right way to use percentages in this context, because remember, these are 42 pieces of work out of 100. So what we did see was that, again, women's empowerment up there, top thing, health again, but we did see more work around democracy, civic rights, inclusion, access, health still there. And there were small things around climate, environmental transition that showed up last year. But again, social issues dominating very much in 2024 as well. So I'm looking forward to next year's numbers and see how that shows up. So a lot of time when I could ask, so what can we learn besides rewatching the commercials, trying to dive into the numbers, etc.? What is it that, what's the secret behind sustainability and environmental campaigns showing up and being so effective? The one clear correlation that WARC and many others in the advertising space have demonstrated clearly is that emotional campaigns are just more effective. And that is the secret, I think, that we see in a lot of these pieces of work, are that they are just very emotional. And obviously because they talk about things that people truly care about, that matters in their communities. It's not about plugging a new hybrid or anything like that. It is really talking and having conversations with people, empowering, enabling them to be part of these conversations. I think this is really the secret sauce behind why some of this stuff works. A key takeaway from this as well was consistency. What we do see is when you're consistent, when you show up, when you keep investing in the brand equity that's being done with Dove and SK2 and many others, it pays off and it accumulates and it keeps being effective.